Before sunrise, in the middle of the Pacific, a small coral island becomes the starting point of a new age. Tinian is quiet at this hour, but it is not asleep. The runway is active. Men move under low light with the discipline of people who have rehearsed the same procedures again and again. Trucks roll slowly. Mechanics check metal surfaces and instruments. Officers look at papers, watches, weather reports and maps. Everything appears controlled. Everything appears technical, and yet the meaning of the mission is larger than any one man on that runway can fully hold in his mind. Waiting there is a B-29 superfortress. Its name is Enola Gay. Within hours, that name will be tied forever to another name, Hiroshima. Beneath the aircraft, hidden inside procedure and secrecy, is an object built by one of the most expensive and secretive scientific efforts in human history. It has been assembled from uranium, engineering, industrial scale, military urgency, and a belief that a single weapon might force the end of a war. The object is called Little Boy. The name sounds almost harmless, but the name is a disguise. This is not a small weapon, it is a doorway into the nuclear age.
The bomb is longer than a man is tall. It weighs several tons.
It represents years of research, factories built for a purpose many workers never fully understood, laboratories where theory became metal, and a chain of decisions that runs from scientific discovery to military command. It is not simply a device. It is the final form of a system. Money, secrecy, fear, ambition, calculation, and war compressed into one aircraft bay. The war in Europe has ended. Nazi Germany has surrendered. But the Pacific War continues with brutal intensity. Island after island has been fought over with terrible losses. Japanese militarism has brought suffering across Asia and the Pacific. Allied planners expect that any invasion of the Japanese home islands could be catastrophic. Political leaders search for a way to force surrender. Military commanders look at maps and casualty projections. Scientists know that a new weapon now exists. The question is no longer whether the weapon can work. The question is where it will be used and what kind of world will exist afterward. The possible targets have been studied and narrowed. Hiroshima, in western Japan, is one of them. On military maps, it is a city of logistical and strategic value. It contains military headquarters, troop concentrations, transport routes, and communications. To planners, it can be described through categories: target, industrial value, military value, urban area, expected effect. But no city is only the categories used to describe it from a distance. Hiroshima is also a place of bridges, rivers, wooden homes, schools, trams, hospitals, shops, offices, temples, families, students, workers, patients, soldiers, and children. That is the first tension this story must hold. The mission is military. The consequences are human. A decision made across the ocean will arrive inside kitchens, classrooms, hospital wards, streetcars, and alleys. An object loaded under secrecy will become a public wound. A weapon built in hidden facilities will be measured in the lives of people who had no part in designing it. The aircraft is prepared. The crew boards. The sky over Japan is checked by weather planes. Clear weather matters. Visibility matters. A target must be seen. A city that has not yet been destroyed by earlier fire raids can reveal the power of the new weapon with terrible clarity. For the planners, that clarity is useful. For the people on the ground, the same clarity means that the city they still recognize will be made into evidence. The film must begin before the explosion, because Hiroshima must first be seen as a living city. If the story begins with the flash, the city becomes a symbol too quickly. If it begins with the island, the aircraft, and the sleeping streets of Hiroshima, the viewer can feel the distance between the language of command and the texture of ordinary life. The bomb will take only seconds to change the city. But those seconds matter because of everything that existed before them. This opening should feel calm, not loud. The horror is not yet visible. The strongest tension comes from knowledge. The viewer knows what is coming. The people on the ground do not. The crew knows the mission is important, but not every man can fully imagine what the bomb will do to a city. The weapon is still enclosed, still mechanical, still part of an operation. In a few hours it will become heat, pressure, radiation, ash, thirst, silence, evidence, controversy, and memory. A city begins its day. Monday, August 6, 1945, begins in Hiroshima with heat, light, and routine. The city wakes into a bright summer morning. Windows are opened for air. Families prepare for work, school, errands, and wartime duties. Trams move through the streets. People carry bags, papers, tools, lunchboxes, and the invisible weight of a war that has already reshaped every part of daily life. Rationing, warnings, uniforms, shortages, and civil defense have become normal enough to be folded into ordinary movement, that ordinariness is essential. Catastrophe often enters history as a date, a number, or a photograph of ruins. But before Hiroshima became a symbol, it was a place where people were living minute by minute. A mother may have been thinking about food, a student may have been thinking about heat, work, or school. A clerk may have been thinking about an office task. A nurse may have been beginning a shift. A tram passenger may have been thinking of nothing more than the next stop. History was approaching, but it did not look like history from the street. Hiroshima is also a city of water. Rivers divide and connect it. Bridges carry the city's movement from one district to another. In ordinary time, these bridges are infrastructure. After the bombing, they will become routes of escape, gathering places, witnesses, and memory sites. Miyuki Bridge, in particular, will become one of the places where the human aftermath is fixed in visual history. But in the morning, it is still simply part of the city's working body. The city has not been spared by the war in a moral sense. It is part of a militarized nation. It contains soldiers and military facilities. But it has not been destroyed in the same way as many other Japanese cities that have already suffered massive incendiary raids. That relative survival creates a dangerous illusion. Some people may believe that Hiroshima has been lucky, or overlooked, or perhaps less likely to be attacked. In reality, the intact condition of the city makes it more useful for measuring the effects of the atomic bomb. This is one of the cruelest facts in the story. A city's survival before the attack can become part of the reason it is chosen. An intact urban fabric makes destruction easier to study. Streets, bridges, buildings, and neighborhoods become the baseline against which the weapon's power will be evaluated. To the people who live there, those same streets and buildings are home. Air raid warnings have become familiar. A single aircraft overhead does not always mean immediate disaster. People have learned to listen, decide, continue, pause, or resume. Habit is necessary in wartime, but habit can also dull the edge of danger. On this morning, the sky is clear. A high aircraft may seem remote, almost unreal. Some look up, some do not. Some notice and continue. Some are indoors, some are on trams, some are in offices, some are children on their way to assigned work or school. The viewer must be allowed to remain in this world for a few minutes. The temptation in a documentary is to hurry toward the famous event, but the emotional truth depends on delay. The loss is not only measured by what is destroyed, it is measured by what had been present. The city before the flash gives scale to the city after the flash. It tells us that the ruins were not born as ruins, they were made. Above Hiroshima, the Enola Gay approaches. The bomb bay carries Little Boy. Other aircraft are involved in observation and measurement. The mission is not only an attack, it is also a test carried out over a populated city. Instruments, cameras, and observers will help turn destruction into data. This does not make the human story less important, it makes it more urgent, because every measurement has a human ground beneath it. The contrast is almost impossible to bear. At altitude, the mission is organized by headings, timing, altitude, weather, and release. On the ground, it is a morning of feet on pavement, hands on windows, voices in rooms, metal wheels on tracks, and ordinary expectations. The bomb moves through one world and arrives in another. 8:15, the Tharas. At approximately 8:15 in the morning, the bomb detonates above Hiroshima. It does not strike the ground like a conventional bomb. It explodes in the air, releasing light, heat, blast pressure, and radiation at a scale no city has ever experienced. The first sensation for many is light. Survivors will describe it in different ways because no familiar word is enough. A flash, a white blaze, a sun, a sheet of fire, a brightness that seems to erase the world before the body can understand it. The thermal pulse strikes exposed surfaces almost instantly. Skin burns. Clothing ignites or scorches. Wood, paper, and fabric respond in fractions of a second. Stone and metal hold traces. Shadows are left where bodies or objects interrupt the heat. The city is marked by light itself. This is not fire as people know it from hearths, kitchens, factories, or even ordinary incendiary attacks. This is physics translated into injury. Then comes the blast wave. It moves outward with immense force. Walls collapse, roofs lift, windows shatter into cutting fields of glass. Wooden houses break apart. People are thrown, crushed, buried, or stunned. Distance from the epicenter matters, but distance is not the only factor. A wall, a hill, a building corner, a window, a doorway, a desk, a moment of posture, an accident of position. All can become the difference between immediate death and survival. For those closest to the center, there is no time to interpret what is happening. For others, survival begins in confusion. A person wakes under debris. Another stands without knowing why there is blood. Another searches for a door that no longer exists. A street has become a field of wreckage. Landmarks are gone. The city that usually tells people where they are has been broken into fragments. Orientation, one of the simplest forms of security, disappears. The sky changes. Dust, smoke, vapor, and particles rise. The great cloud forms above the city, the image that will become one of the defining symbols of the 20th century. But below that cloud are not symbols. There are people calling, names, looking for water, pulling at beams, carrying the injured, walking without direction, sitting in shock and trying to understand whether the world they knew still exists. The bomb has changed more than buildings. It has changed the rules by which people understand danger. Fire can be seen. A collapsing wall can be heard. A wound can be bandaged. But radiation is invisible. In the first hours, most people do not know that the attack has left behind a danger that can continue inside bodies after the blast has ended. The disaster is therefore both immediate and delayed. It is present in the street and hidden in blood. This scene should be filmed with restraint. The flash can be powerful, but the film must not turn it into spectacle. The true center is not the beauty of a detonation or the shape of a cloud. The true center is the city beneath it. Every visual choice must remember that the most important effect of the bomb is not visual grandeur, it is human injury, disorientation, thirst, grief, and the beginning of a new fear. After the blast, sound returns in broken forms. The normal city sound is gone. Streetcars, morning conversation, work, footsteps with purpose. In its place are cries, cracking wood, fire, falling debris, distant voices, and the strange quiet that follows shock. People move because movement is the only possible answer. They look for family, they look for water, they look for help, they look for an explanation. The explanation will take years. The attack itself lasts seconds. The disaster does not. Hiroshima has entered a time that will stretch through the day, through the night, through medical records, through survivor testimony, through political debate, through nuclear strategy, and through every generation that inherits the memory. Among those who survive is Yoshito Matsushige, a photographer in Hiroshima. He is not at the exact center of the blast, but he is close enough for the city around him to be shattered. Like everyone else, he must first understand that he is alive. Only after that can he begin to understand what it means to move through a city that has been made almost unrecognizable. His camera becomes one of the most important objects in the story, not because a camera can tell the whole truth. No photograph can contain the heat, the smell, the thirst, the sound, the pain, or the moral confusion of that day. But a photograph can do something essential. It can resist erasure. It can prove that a place existed, that people stood there, that a moment happened, that suffering was not abstract. Matsushige recovers his camera and moves out into the damaged city. The route is dangerous. Fires block access. Smoke changes direction. Debris interrupts streets. People are wounded, burned, dazed, searching, crying out, or moving silently. The center is too dangerous to reach. The city is not a battlefield in the usual sense. It is a civilian urban world, torn open by a weapon no one on the ground could have imagined. He moves toward Miyuki Bridge. The bridge becomes one of the defining sights of the day, not because it explains everything, but because it concentrates the human aftermath into one visible place. Survivors gather there. Some have fled fire, some are burned, some wait for help. Some do not know where else to go. The bridge is no longer only a crossing over water. It is a place of waiting, shock, thirst, pain, and evidence. For a photographer, the instinct is to record. For a human being, the instinct may be to look away. Matsushige stands between those instincts. To photograph suffering can feel necessary and unbearable at the same time. Pressing the shutter is not a purely technical act, it is a moral act. His hesitation matters. It protects the story from becoming voyeurism. It reminds us that the person holding the camera is not outside the disaster, he is inside it. The photographs he eventually takes are rare and powerful. Their force comes partly from what they show, but also from when and how they were made. They were not produced years later by institutions. They were made in the first hours by a survivor with a camera, surrounded by destruction, facing the question of whether documentation can be an obligation even when it hurts. The remake should treat Matsushige as a witness, not as a simplified hero. His courage is not theatrical. It is quiet, conflicted, and human. A hand around a camera, a pause before the shutter, Smoke beyond a bridge, people waiting. A photographer unable, for a moment, to turn suffering into an image. That is enough, the truth is already strong. His photographs become part of a larger chain of memory. First they are evidence, later they are archived, studied, reproduced, and seen by people born long after the war. They become moral objects, asking what it means to see pain and what responsibility follows from seeing it. They do not allow Hiroshima to remain only a military claim or a political argument, they return the story to the ground. Miyake Bridge becomes a witness. In ordinary time, a bridge connects two sides of a city. On August 6th, it becomes a place where the city pauses because it has nowhere else to go. People gather there after the blast. Some are burned, some are injured in ways they do not yet understand. Some are thirsty, some are waiting for help that cannot arrive at the scale required. Around them, Hiroshima is burning. The bridge matters because it refuses abstraction. Military report can speak of damage radius, blast pressure, or target value. A bridge filled with survivors speaks in another language. It shows bodies in a place, people in relation to water, exhaustion in posture, shock in stillness. It does not explain the entire bombing, but it makes it impossible to discuss the bombing only as strategy. At the same time, the bridge reveals the limits of images. A photograph can show people seated or standing, clothes torn or burned, faces turned away, a crowd gathered in pain. It cannot transmit the heat, smell, thirst, fear, or silence. It cannot show every person just outside the frame. It cannot restore names to everyone. It cannot make the viewer fully understand what it meant to be there. The image is not the whole truth. It is a doorway into the truth. For this reason, the bridge should be handled with restraint. A documentary about Hiroshima does not need to chase the most shocking possible visual. The real power of Miyake Bridge lies in its stillness. Water below, smoke behind, people waiting, a hand on stone, a photographer hesitating, a city broken beyond rescue. These elements are stronger than spectacle because they leave space for dignity. The bridge can become a recurring visual motif. At first, it is part of the city's geography. Then it is a gathering place. Then it becomes a photograph. Later it becomes evidence. Finally it becomes memory. Each return changes its meaning. A structure built for movement becomes a place where history stops and asks to be seen. The film should never reproduce a famous image merely to imitate it. The goal is not to copy a frame. The goal is to preserve the function of that frame, to make the human aftermath visible while creating a new, original, ethically distinct sequence. If rights-cleared archival images are available, they must be sourced and documented. If not, the film should use symbolic or reconstructed imagery that does not pretend to be original evidence. 4. The people on the bridge. None of the future meanings exist yet. They are not thinking about archives. They are not thinking about history. They are trying to remain alive. They are thirsty. They are hurt. They may not know where their family members are. They may not know what kind of weapon has struck them. They may not know that invisible injury has already entered the story. Their present is the only thing they can bear. The documentary must honor that present. It must not turn the people on the bridge into props for an argument. It must not reduce them to proof of a position. They are human beings at the edge of endurance. Their suffering is not an illustration, it is the central fact. After the flash and the blast, fire becomes the next enemy. Hiroshima burns in many places at once. Wooden buildings ignite. Debris catches flame. People trapped beneath collapsed structures hear the fire approaching. Those who can move try to escape through streets that no longer function as streets. Smoke reduces visibility. Heat pushes people toward open areas, rivers and bridges. Water becomes a need, an instinct, and a symbol. People search for water to drink, to cool burns, to escape flames, to survive one more moment. The rivers fill with desperate movement. The banks become places of collapse and waiting. Some people reach the water and cannot leave it. Others search among the crowds for family members whose faces may be hard to recognize. The city of rivers becomes a city of thirst. Water, however, is not simple rescue. The scale of injury is too great. The heat is too intense. The roads are blocked. The people who might help are themselves injured, dead, missing, or overwhelmed. A person who survives the first instant may still die because no one can reach them, because there is no medicine, because the burns are too severe, because the body has absorbed damage no one can see. Then, in some areas, dark rain falls. It will be remembered as black rain, carrying soot, dust, and radioactive material. To those beneath it, it may first seem like relief from heat, But the bombing has changed the meaning of natural things. Rain, usually a comfort after fire, becomes another form of uncertainty. The invisible danger of radiation enters ordinary senses without announcing itself. This is one of the most difficult parts of the story to communicate. People know what fire is, they know what rubble is, they know what a wound is, but radiation does not look like a wall of flame. It has no face. It does not create a visible boundary that people can avoid. It moves through the disaster quietly, becoming part of bodies, symptoms, fear, and later medical investigation. The city is full of needs that cannot be met. People need water, shade, bandages, doctors, family, information, shelter, and direction. Almost none of these needs can be answered at the scale required. Survivors become rescuers while injured themselves. Those who can walk try to help those who cannot. Those who cannot find loved ones keep searching because stopping would mean accepting a possibility too painful to name. Night does not end the emergency. Darkness changes it. Fires glow where streets should be. People remain outdoors or in damaged buildings. The wounded wait. Some die during the night. Others survive without knowing why. The first day becomes the first night, and the disaster continues with no clear border. Visually, this section should be atmospheric, not exploitative. Smoke, water, ash, empty streets, damaged bridges, hands carrying containers, bodies seen only respectfully and at distance, lantern-like firelight, medical improvisation, and silence can carry the truth. The goal is not to overwhelm the viewer with graphic images. The goal is to make the viewer understand that the bombing did not end when the aircraft left. In the hours and days after the bombing, Hiroshima confronts injuries that exceed the categories available to those trying to treat them. There are burns, cuts, fractures, infections, dehydration, shock, and trauma. These are terrible, but they are at least recognizable. Then come symptoms that do not behave like ordinary wounds. Some people who seem to have survived begin to weaken. Fever appears, bleeding appears, vomiting appears, hair falls out, people collapse after hours or days. The bomb continues to act after the explosion. The attack is no longer only an event in the street, it is an event inside the body. Doctors and nurses try to respond in impossible conditions. Many medical workers are dead or injured, hospitals are damaged, supplies are limited, the number of patients is overwhelming, treatment becomes improvisation, observation becomes urgent. The people trying to heal the city must also learn, in real time, what kind of weapon has struck it. Radiation changes the meaning of survival. A person can walk away from the blast and still be in danger. A person can have no obvious wound and still be gravely harmed. A person can believe they are safe because the fire did not reach them, only to discover that the bomb has left a hidden injury. This uncertainty spreads fear. If the danger cannot be seen, how can anyone know where it ends? The scientific record becomes essential. Reports, charts, photographs, tissue samples, and medical examinations help the world understand what happened. But the record is morally complicated. Every data point begins as a person. Every symptom belongs to a life. Every chart is built from suffering. A documentary must not allow medical evidence to become cold in a way that erases the people behind it. Images in this section should be careful. Public domain medical reports, archive pages, empty hospital corridors, hands turning documents, microscopes, maps of damage, and restrained diagrams can explain without violating dignity. If direct images are too graphic or rights restricted, symbolic visuals are better. A closed file, an empty bed, a shadow on a hospital wall, a notebook page, or a doctor's hand can be more respectful than a shocking image. The medical aftermath also changes the timeline of Hiroshima. The bomb is not only an explosion at 8:15. It continues in symptoms, scars, cancers, pregnancies, fear, stigma, research, and memory. The city is struck once, but survivors meet the bomb again in different forms for the rest of their lives. This section should make the viewer understand that nuclear weapons do not simply destroy space. They disturb time. They carry consequences forward into bodies and generations. They create a disaster whose full meaning cannot be measured on the day it happens. To understand Hiroshima, the story must move away from the ruins and back into the rooms where decisions were made. By the summer of 1945, the war in the Pacific has reached a brutal stage. Germany has surrendered, but Japan has not. American leaders consider military options, projected casualties, diplomatic pressures, and the new weapon created by the Manhattan Project. Hiroshima is selected for reasons that can be described in military terms. It is a city with logistical value, military facilities, communication links, and troop presence. It has not been devastated in the same way as many other urban centers, which makes the effects of the bomb easier to observe. It is large enough for the weapon's power to be measured. It is visible from the air under the right weather conditions. These reasons explain a process. They do not erase the human result. A city can contain military facilities and still contain children on their way to school. A command structure can exist inside a civilian urban world. A strategic decision can be made in one place and experienced as fire, thirst, injury, and darkness in another. A responsible documentary must resist slogans. The Pacific War was brutal. Japanese militarism caused immense suffering across Asia and the Pacific. Allied planners expected the continuation of the war to bring terrible losses. At the same time, the use of an atomic bomb over a city created civilian suffering at a scale and of a kind that demanded moral reckoning. Holding these facts together is difficult, but it is more honest than choosing a simple sentence and pretending it is enough. 3 days after Hiroshima, Nagasaki will be struck by a second atomic bomb. Soon after, Japan will announce surrender. Historians will continue to debate the relative weight of the atomic bombings, Soviet entry into the war against Japan, Japanese political dynamics, military exhaustion, imperial authority, and diplomatic calculation. The documentary does not need to pretend that one explanation settles every question. It needs to show why Hiroshima became central to the end of the war and why its meaning did not end there. Maps are useful in this section. Tinian, Japan, Hiroshima, the route, the hypocenter, the damage radius, the relation between military sites and civilian neighborhoods. But maps must not dominate the story. A map can show distance. It cannot show a mother searching for a child. It cannot show a photographer unable to press the shutter. It cannot show a doctor without supplies. This is the moral tension at the center of the film. Strategy is real. Human consequence is real. The documentary becomes stronger when it refuses to erase either one. Hiroshima is not only the end of one phase of war, it is the beginning of the nuclear age. After August 6th, the world knows that a city can be destroyed by one weapon. From that point forward, political imagination changes, military power changes, fear changes, the future changes. After Japan's surrender, Hiroshima becomes not only a wounded city, but also a site of investigation. Teams arrive to study damage, injuries, radiations, structures, and survivors. Photographs are collected, buildings are measured, medical cases are documented, reports are written, evidence is classified, archived, restricted, interpreted, and eventually released in different forms. This part of the story has a different emotional temperature. The first hours are heat, smoke, confusion, and thirst. The post-war record is colder. File rooms, report covers, numbered photographs, typed pages, cabinets, maps, tables, and technical language. The human suffering of Hiroshima enters systems of knowledge and control. The US Strategic Bombing Survey documents physical damage. Medical missions study effects on the human body. Later institutions examine survivors over time. For science, the data is extraordinary. For survivors, the experience can feel more complicated. To be measured is not the same as to be cared for. To be studied is not always to be healed. There is also the question of what the world is allowed to see. Some film and photographic evidence of Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not circulate freely at first. Occupation policy, military secrecy, political concerns, editorial decisions, and institutional control shaped the visual memory of the bombings. The images that became famous are only part of what existed. The archive is not neutral by accident. It is built through choices. For a modern remake, this matters deeply. Every visual must be traceable. If an image comes from a public archive, the source, item link, rights status, and identifier should be recorded. If a Japanese archive holds an image but does not clearly allow reuse, it can guide accuracy but should not be used directly without permission. If AI reconstructs a scene, the production must not pretend that the reconstruction is a 1945 document. International sources are important here. American archives can provide military film, photographs, records, and public domain materials. Japanese institutions can provide crucial context, local memory, geography, and testimony, though rights must be checked carefully. British medical reports and scientific missions can add another perspective. Australian collections can show post-war ruins and Commonwealth viewpoints. UNESCO can help lock historical facts about the Genbaku Dome and its preservation. The film should make evidence feel alive. A photograph travels from a damaged city to a file, from a file to a report, from a report to an archive, from an archive to a screen. At each stage, meaning can be protected or distorted. The more carefully the production handles evidence, the stronger the documentary becomes. This is also where stock and archive sourcing must guide the visual method. The goal is not to generate everything artificially. The goal is to search first for rights-safe stock, archive footage, public domain documents, open license images, and verified institutional material. AI is a fallback for missing or restricted visuals, not the default replacement for history. The survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki come to be known as hibakusha. The word identifies those affected by the atomic bombings, but the word survivor can be misleading. Survival sounds like an ending. For many hibakusha, survival is the beginning of a long aftermath. Some carry burns, scars, illness, grief, and fear. Some develop late effects. Some live with the memory of family members they could not save. Some feel guilt for having survived. Some speak publicly. Some remain silent. Some protect themselves by not revealing what they experienced. The bomb continues not only in bodies, but also in social life. Radiation becomes surrounded by fear and misunderstanding. Survivors may be treated as contaminated, fragile, unmarriageable, or dangerous to future generations. Families worry about stigma. Silence can become a shield, but it is also another wound. A person who has already endured the bombing may also have to endure suspicion from society. This is one of the most important emotional turns in the film. The bombing is not finished when the fires go out. It continues through illness, memory, discrimination, family fear, and the difficulty of testimony. The damage is physical, psychological, social, and historical. The remake should approach this with restraint. Rain on glass, a person seated with documents, hands folding paper, a family photograph, a bridge in modern light, a hospital corridor without visible faces. A survivor's testimony should be used only if sourced and permitted. If a name is used, it must be correct. If a quote is used, it must be traceable. If a face appears, rights and dignity must be considered. The hibakusha are not only symbols of suffering. Many become educators, witnesses, activists, and guardians of memory. Their testimony turns survival into public responsibility. They do not ask the world merely to feel pity. They ask the world to understand what nuclear weapons do to human beings, cities, families, time, and truth. As years pass, testimony becomes a race against time. The people who saw the bombing with their own eyes grow older. Younger generations inherit a memory they did not live. Hiroshima becomes a living city again. Modern streets, schools, trains, parks, ceremonies, museums, and ordinary life. That renewal is not a denial of the past. It is part of the story. The city lives, and because it lives, it must remember. Every year, Hiroshima returns to the hour. The city pauses, bells ring, people gather, lanterns float on water. The Genbaku Dome stands not as an abandoned ruin, but as a preserved wound inside a living city. Around it, modern Hiroshima moves, works, studies, grieves, and remembers. The ending must not provide easy consolation. Nothing restores the lives lost in August 1945. Nothing makes the suffering clean. Memory does not undo the event, but memory can refuse disappearance. It can carry names, photographs, testimony, documents, and warning into a future where direct witnesses are fewer each year. The final movement should return to the visual motifs introduced at the beginning, but changed. At first there was an aircraft, a bomb, a map, and a secret mission. At the end there is water, lanterns, documents, hands, bells, and the dome. The story moves from secrecy to witness, from weapon to memory, from target to city. The film can close with a simple recognition. Hiroshima is not only the place where the sky fell, it is the place where people continue to speak after the world tried to reduce them to a statistic. Testimony remains because someone photographed, someone wrote, someone studied, someone preserved, someone remembered, and someone chose to pass the warning forward. The viewer's responsibility is not only to feel something for a few minutes, it is to understand that memory requires precision. Sources matter, words matter, images matter, rights matter, dignity matters. A documentary about Hiroshima must be powerful, but it must also be careful. It must be cinematic, but not false. It must be emotional, but not manipulative. The final image can be water, not water that erases, but water that carries. A lantern moves slowly, a reflection trembles. The modern city continues around the memorial. The voice remains quiet. Every generation receives Hiroshima from the generation before it. What it receives is not only grief, It is a warning built from photographs, records, survivors, doctors, archives, ceremonies, and a city that refused to let destruction become the last definition of its name. To hold a film close to 50 minutes, the narration must breathe without becoming loose. The story should move through chapters, but each chapter must have a purpose. The opening on Tinian should not simply repeat shots of the aircraft or the bomb. It can use runways, low light, archival military footage, maps of the Pacific, hands-over documents, metal details, sea, cloud, and the quiet mechanical atmosphere of a mission being prepared. The feeling is not action. The feeling is inevitability being assembled piece by piece. When the film reaches Hiroshima before the bombing, the visual rhythm should soften. The city should not be presented only as future ruin. It should be shown as a living environment. Rivers, bridges, streets, trams, roofs, windows, school routes and maps. Write-safe stock and archive images can carry much of this section. Where exact footage is unavailable, generic period-consistent visuals or original reconstructions may be used, but the production notes must distinguish reconstruction from evidence. The blast itself should be powerful but brief. The audience already knows the famous image of the mushroom cloud. What many viewers know less well is the experience below it. Disorientation, fire, water, medical uncertainty, the first photographs, and the long social aftermath. Therefore, the edit should move from scale to intimacy. First the light, then the street, then a hand, then a bridge, then a page in a report, then a survivor's memory. Matsushige provides a strong narrative thread because he gives the film a human point of view without forcing invented drama. His camera can appear before his photographs do. The film can show the object, the damaged city, the route blocked by fire, the bridge, the hesitation, and finally the act of witness. This thread connects visual evidence to moral difficulty. The audience sees not only a photograph, but the burden of making one. The medical section can rely heavily on stock and public domain archive material without becoming sensationalistic. It can use report pages, hands-turning files, hospital corridors, microscopes, empty beds, scientific diagrams, and official documents. AI should be reserved for original visualizations of radiation, restrained maps, and historically plausible environments that cannot be sourced safely. The goal is understanding, not shock. The political section should become colder and more geometric. Maps, rooms of decision, documents, timelines, flight routes, public domain leader images where permitted, and newspaper textures can support the voice. The narration must not shout, it must explain. The audience should feel that the decision had a strategic logic and that the human consequences exceeded the language of strategy. The archive section can show the life of evidence: boxes, shelves, film reels, catalog systems, scanners, photographs, labels, institutional pages, and rights notes. This is more than production method, it is part of the story. Hiroshima has been remembered through evidence that had to be collected, protected, restricted, released, interpreted, and reinterpreted. The film should make that chain visible. In the modern memory section, stock and public domain B-roll can be especially strong. Memorial ceremonies, lanterns, water, the Genbaku Dome, flowers, bells, students, visitors, and quiet city movement. If privacy or rights are uncertain, use wider shots, silhouettes, hands, objects, water, and architecture. The goal is not to collect random faces. The goal is to communicate continuity. The new film should be similar to the reference in structure and emotional function, but original in language, visual sourcing, pacing, and assembly. It should preserve the journey, secret mission, living city, detonation, witness, bridge, fire and water, medical mystery, decision context, evidence control, hibakusha, and memory. But it should not copy the reference's exact wording, edit, frames, graphics, branding, or voice. It should feel like a stronger documentary built from the same historical spine, not a duplicate. For this project, the visual method matters almost as much as the script. The film should not default to artificial images. The first search for nearly every scene should be stock, archive footage, public domain photographs, open license material, or institutional media accessed through APIs and catalog pages. The goal is to let reality carry as much of the film as possible. For the Tinian sequence, the first sources should include military archives, public domain B-29 footage, maps, aircraft images, runway scenes, and documents related to the mission. If exact Tinian footage is unavailable, broader public domain Pacific airbase footage may work as long as it is not mislabeled. A visual can support the feeling of the scene without pretending to be a specific shot if it is documented honestly. For the Hiroshima mourning sequence, Japanese sources should be checked carefully. Some collections may allow viewing but not reuse. Some may require permission. If rights are unclear, those sources should guide accuracy, not become final media. Public domain urban textures, maps, bridges, trams, and period city visuals can be used when properly cleared. Original AI reconstructions should be used only when no safe visual exists and should remain historically restrained. For the aftermath, the ethical bar must be high. Public domain archive material may exist, but the film should avoid using graphic suffering simply because it is available. The question is not only can we use this? The question is also, should we use this in this way? Where real imagery is too invasive, symbolic visuals, documents, locations, and distant views can carry the narrative with more dignity. For the medical and archive sections, stock/API coverage should be high. Files, reports, scanning tables, archive shelves, public domain medical plates, official documents, scientific diagrams, and institutional pages can cover many 5-second slots. These are the scenes where AI should be least necessary. The human voice and the archive visuals can do the work. For the memory ending, modern B-roll from public domain or open sources can be strong. Ceremonies, memorial spaces, rivers, lanterns, the dome, flowers, paper cranes, and quiet city movement, where people appear. Privacy and permission must be considered. Wide or non-identifying shots are often safer and more respectful. Every scene should record its sourcing attempt. The manifest should include the query, source, item URL, rights status, candidate notes, selected asset, and whether AI fallback was needed. If AI is used, the reason must be recorded. No rights-safe candidate, unclear license, insufficient quality, historically impossible shot, ethical concern, or need for an original map or diagram. This discipline protects both the project and the story. The first 8 seconds must do more than introduce a topic. They must create a question the viewer cannot easily abandon. The opening image should not be generic, destruction. It should begin before destruction, with the sense that history is being prepared in silence. A runway in darkness, a map line across the Pacific, a metal door closing, a crew moving without ceremony, a weapon whose name sounds almost innocent. The first words should establish scale and secrecy. Before dawn, on a small island in the Pacific, men prepare a machine that will change the meaning of war. This is stronger than beginning with a statement like, "This is the story of Hiroshima." The viewer should feel motion already underway. The mission has begun before the viewer has fully caught up. The hook should then pivot quickly to the ground. The aircraft is leaving Tinian, but the story belongs also to a city that is waking up. This creates the core tension, the sky and the street, the military mission and the civilian mourning, the hidden weapon and the visible life below. If the first 8 seconds establish only danger, the film is familiar. If they establish 2 worlds moving toward collision, the film becomes compelling. Visually, the opening should avoid logos, fake labels, dramatic text, and copied reference graphics. A clean original map, public domain aircraft imagery, and restrained sound design can do more than a flashy title. The voice should be calm. A calm voice over grave material creates trust. It tells the viewer that the film will not exploit the topic. The voiceover should sound like a premium historical documentary, clear, grave, controlled, compassionate, and steady. It should not imitate the original narrator. It should not try to sound like a trailer. It should not overperform grief. The material is serious enough. A voice that trusts the facts will be stronger than a voice that pushes emotion too hard. Pacing matters. A 50-minute script needs variation. Some sentences should be short and direct. Others can be longer, especially when explaining context. The voice should slow slightly around the bridge, the medical, aftermath, and the ending. It can move more firmly through the mission setup and decision context. Natural pauses are important. Silence can be part of the narration. Music should remain subordinate. Low strings, restrained drones, and subtle archival texture can support the voice, but they should not control the viewer's feelings. In the most sensitive sections, less music may be more powerful. A quiet room, a page turning, water moving, or distant city ambience can hold more truth than a heavy score. The final mix must keep the voice intelligible at all times. No sudden loudness jumps, no muddy low end, no aggressive impact sounds during traumatic sections, no theatrical explosions that turn the bombing into entertainment. The sound design should respect the difference between historical gravity and spectacle. Maps are essential, but they must be clean and original. The film needs maps of the Pacific, Tinian, Japan, Hiroshima, the aircraft route, the hypocenter, the rivers, and damage zones. These maps should not copy the reference documentary's design. They should use a sober, archival style with minimal text. Labels should be accurate, dates should be clear, motion should be slow and functional. Documents can carry much of the film's authority. A typed report, a public domain photograph record, a medical chart, a government page, a catalogue entry, or a library scan can make the story feel grounded. But documents must not be faked. AI-generated fake text is dangerous in historical work. If a document is not real or rights cleared, use blurred abstract paper textures or original diagrams without pretending they are archival records. Scientific diagrams should explain without overwhelming. Heat, blast, radiation, distance from hypocenter, and delayed symptoms can be shown with simple visual language. The goal is comprehension, not technical spectacle. A viewer should understand that the bomb injured people through several mechanisms: thermal pulse, pressure, fire, debris, radiation, and the collapse of medical systems. Where the film uses AI for diagrams, it should use clean graphics rather than fake archival text. AI is good for original visualization when controlled. It is risky for creating historical-looking pages with illegible writing. The safest rule is simple: real documents must come from real sources. Original graphics must look intentionally original. Hiroshima forces a documentary maker to decide what not to show. The existence of a powerful image does not automatically mean it should be used. The film should avoid graphic suffering used only for shock. It should never treat victims as visual material. The purpose of showing injury, if it is shown at all, must be historical understanding and human dignity. Distance can be ethical. A bridge seen from across the water, a hand on stone, a burned landscape without close human exposure, a medical file, a survivor's object. These can communicate the scale of suffering without violating the viewer or the subject. Restraint is not weakness. In a film like this, restraint is a form of respect. AI should not invent identifiable victims. It should not create fake close-up faces of suffering people and present them as if they were real. If reconstruction is needed, use anonymous figures, silhouettes, environmental details, or symbolic compositions. The goal is to support narration, not fabricate testimony. The same applies to survivor stories. Do not invent a named survivor. Do not invent a quote. Do not put words into the mouth of a real person. General narration can describe experiences based on documented patterns, but specific names and quotations require sources. The more painful the material, the more careful the sourcing must be. The ending should not feel like a solution. Hiroshima was not solved by memory, it was carried by memory. The final movement should show a living city that has not forgotten. Modern streets, students, visitors, water, ceremony, the dome, flowers, paper cranes and lanterns can create a sense of continuity. But the narration should not say that life returning makes the event acceptable. It does not. The strongest ending may be quiet, a lantern on water, the dome in evening light, a document closing, a photograph fading into an archive box, a bridge seen without crowds. The voice can return to the opening contrast, a weapon prepared in secrecy, a city waking in light, and the long human work of remembering what followed. The final words should not command the viewer. They should leave the viewer with responsibility. Hiroshima remains because witnesses spoke, photographs survived, doctors recorded, archivists preserved, survivors taught, and a city chose memory over silence. The question is what the viewer will do with that inheritance. The duty is not only to remember that a bomb fell, it is to remember that the sky did not fall by accident. It fell because human beings learned how to make it fall, built the means to do so, chose a target, and then had to live with the result. That knowledge is heavy. A serious documentary should not make it lighter. It should help the viewer carry it honestly. After the last bell, after the last lantern, after the final image of water, the story should remain in the mind for a moment longer. Great historical tragedies are often shortened into familiar symbols. Hiroshima asks for the opposite. It asks for patience. It asks us not to mistake recognition for understanding. The film can return briefly to the beginning, the runway, the aircraft, the sealed bomb bay, the clear sky, the city waking, the bridge, the photographer, the medical files, the survivors, the dome. These are not separate chapters, they are one chain. If the chain is broken, the story becomes simpler and less true. If the chain is kept intact, the viewer understands that the bomb was not only an object, it was a system of decisions and consequences. The last thought should be simple. If a story is important enough to tell, it is important enough to tell carefully. Hiroshima deserves more than dramatic images. It deserves sources, accuracy, restraint, and a voice that knows when to be quiet. It deserves a film that is similar enough to preserve the historical spine, but original enough to stand on its own. The sky fell once over Hiroshima. The warning remains because people chose to remember what happened beneath it.